completely out of touch and insult the intelligence of the American people and living beings.
You're a trained clinician. Do you think there's some schizotypal or schizophrenic type organization there in his head, or lack of organization? I mean, what are we to make of this? And we had to see somebody assassinated, shot in the back.
If I had to hazard a guess, I would say the first thing I would be looking for is pathological narcissism. Disordered thought? Possibly, but he was quite successful academically. Like the typical pattern for something like schizophrenic dissolution is very, very much difficulty in maintaining. So discipline, striving in a highly intellectual atmosphere. For example. Yeah. So I think more Luciferian grandiosity, and the intellect is particularly prone to that. You know, the archetypal representation of the intellect that overreaches is Lucifer, right? God's highest angel gone most catastrophically wrong, which means that the best thing in its place is the worst thing on the top. That happens with sexuality. It can happen with aggression. It certainly happens with the intellect. And so I think he's a worshipper of his own intellect and believed that he was the guy who could make the decision, even of life and death, which means he took onto himself the role of ultimate judge. And that's what the kid who shot up Columbine did too, and said in his own writings. He's the judge, and that's like narcissistic beyond comprehension. And the fact that he's being celebrated, well, that's an echo of that moralizing narcissism that's deeply embedded in our culture. Deeply embedded.
I felt, along with so many other Americans, joy, unfortunately, you know, because it feels like...
Seriously?
I mean...
Joy at the man's execution?
Maybe not joy, but certainly not empathy. Because again...
But watching the footage, how can this make you joyful? This guy's a husband, he's a father, he's being gunned down in the middle of Manhattan. Why does that make you joyful?
Thousands of Americans that get murdered. So are the tens of thousands of Americans, innocent Americans, who died because greedy health insurance executives like this one push policies of denying care to the most vulnerable people. And the many millions of Americans that have watched people that I care about suffer and in some cases die because of lack of health care.
Should they all be killed then? Should they all be killed, these healthcare executives? Would that make you even more joyful?
No, that would not.
Well, why not?
And,
why not?
I think...
Was he denied a claim, or was someone near him denied a claim?
He had these back problems. United Healthcare was not his healthcare provider, but they are the biggest, I believe, and they deny the most claims. And the target is interesting that he chose that guy. I guess he chose him as a symbol of the inequity in the healthcare system and how fucked up it is. It is a fucked up
Why
system.
wouldn't he go after a CEO of the company that
That's a great question, and that's a question that people are asking.
Was he mentally ill? Well, obviously. To be able to do that, you have to be at least at some level.
You know, he was a smart guy who had an Ivy League education and a wealthy family, but apparently he maybe had a psychic break in the last 3 or 4 months where he was writing manifestos, reading a lot of Unabomber stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
Unabomber?
Yeah, he was a big fan of Ted Kaczynski. This dude clearly was trying to get his name out there, get attention. In a lot of these circumstances, the media might say, like, hey, look, we don't want to get this person attention, he's trying to get it. Everybody and their grandmother is trying to get this guy attention. The left is cheering for him. So I think it would be prudent to actually look at what his motivations are so we can rip them to shreds. But when you actually read the guy's manifesto, I was dumbfounded at how stupid he is. And again, I want to stress, I'm not saying that of emotion. I am not saying that because I disagree with him and I think he's a bad guy. I think he's a bad guy and I think he's I disagree with his political views. But holy crap, his manifesto articulates nothing.
On December 4th, 2024, 26-year-old Luigi Mangione allegedly shot Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare in Midtown Manhattan. It took 5 days to arrest Mangione, and when arrested, a copy of a manifesto he wrote was found on him. To the feds, I'll keep this short because I do respect what you do for our country. To save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone. This was fairly trivial, some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, a lot of patience. The spiral notebook, if present, has some struggling notes and to-do lists that illuminate the gist of it. My tech is pretty locked down because I work in engineering, so probably not much info there. I do apologize for any strife of traumas, but it had to be done. Frankly, this parasite simply had it coming. A reminder, the US has the #1 most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet we rank roughly number 42 in life expectancy. United is the largest company in the US by market cap, behind only Apple, Google, Walmart. It has grown and grown, but as our life expectancy. No, the reality is, these have simply gotten too powerful, and they continue to abuse our country for immense profit because the American public has allowed them to get away with it. Obviously, the problem is more complex, but I do not have space, and frankly, I do not pretend to be the most qualified person to lay out the full argument. But many have illuminated the corruption and greed, in example Rosenthal and more, decades ago, and the problems simply remain. It is not an issue of awareness at this point, but clearly power games are played. Evidently, I am the first to face it with such brutal honesty. On first read, Luigi's objectives seem pretty clear. He is mad about the healthcare industry, which, according to his opinion, is abusing the country for immense profit. He claims that it had to be done and that this parasite simply had it coming. It would be easy to leave it to that, a naive kid who thinks he is obligated to change the world and that he must take action to do so. But this might not be the full story. Could there have been other factors that led to Luigi's actions, or was it just a plot to spark a change in the US healthcare system? Like most things in life, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. The goal of this video is not to try to provide decisive answers, but rather to explore the available data on the subject, so you can decide for yourself. In his manifesto, Luigi mentions that he is not the most qualified to lay the argument against the healthcare system, but he does cite two people who, according to him, illuminated the corruption and greed of it. Luigi is referring to Elizabeth Rosenthal, the author of the book On American Sickness, How Healthcare Became Big Business and How You Can Take It Back. She opens her book with the claim that, in the past quarter century, the American medical system has stopped focusing on health or even science. Instead, it attends more or less single-mindedly to its own profits.
My assumption at that time was that that would pass, and I would go back to being a doctor and do writing on the side. And of course, it didn't, and I didn't, and here we are 20 years later, grappling with the system which is many, many times worse and takes less care of patients, I would say. So when people want a bad guy, my first response is, there's no one bad guy. Everyone is kind of playing off. I mean, there are plenty of bad guys, but it's not like pharma or the insurers or hospital. Everyone's playing their role, and it's led to this system which nobody likes.
Luigi also cites Michael Moore, the maker of the film Sicko.
The intent is to maximize profits.
If you denied more people health care, you got a bonus.
When you don't spend money on somebody, it's a savings to the company.
I want America to have the finest health care in the world.
4 healthcare lobbyists for every member of Congress.
Here's what it costs to buy these men, and this woman, this guy, and this guy. And the United States slipped to 37 in healthcare around the world, just slightly ahead of Slovenia.
It's easy to see from where he got his ideas. But what about Luigi's own experience with the healthcare system? According to The Independent, Luigi went missing and cut off contact with family and friends after undergoing back surgery. His friend Martin told The Independent that Luigi suffered from debilitating chronic back pain and underwent major surgery for it in 2023. Quote, "The injury hampered Mangione's ability to surf and also took a toll on his romantic life. His spine was kind of misaligned." End quote. In fact, Luigi wrote online that he suffered from spondylolisthesis and was active in a community of people suffering from the condition. Spondylolisthesis is where one of the bones in the spine, called the vertebra, slips away. In an article covering the case, the Rolling Stone interviewed people who suffer from the same condition. Quote, "The pain is worse than you can imagine for me. There is a deep sense of grief in this that just becomes pure rage when you think of how insurance companies make it worse." End quote. We don't know how his medical condition affected Luigi, but we do know he suffered greatly from it. If you ever suffered from chronic pain, you know that it can take over your life, leading you to focus only on the pain, not seeing the bigger picture of life. As a good-looking young guy, there is certainly a chance that his medical condition led to depression and loss of hope. Did Luigi feel like he had nothing to lose? Only time will tell. Luigi's social media presence is difficult to decipher. There's a lot of random topics he engages with. For example, to the question, if religion is so bad and evil and dumb and wrong, why hasn't atheism outcompeted it ever in all of human history? Luigi wrote, "This always baffles me too. Not a difficult concept. When I was 15, I wrote a paper about Christianity's rise over secular Roman paganism. The paper is pretty normal for a 15-year-old. In his acknowledgements, he thanked Spotify for helping him stay focused during his research and writing. He routinely engages with many prominent figures across both political axes, touching upon many different subjects. But the story gets interesting by looking at the Goodreads review Luigi wrote on the Industrial Society and Its Future by Ted Kaczynski, also known as the Unabomber. In his manifesto, Kaczynski laid his criticism on the modern industrial society. Quote, "The Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. They have greatly increased the life expectancy of those of us who live in advanced countries. But they have destabilized society, have made life unfulfilling, have subjected human beings to indignities, have led to widespread psychological suffering, in the third world to physical suffering as well, and have inflicted severe damage on the natural world. The continued development of technology will worsen the situation. It will certainly subject human beings to greater indignities and inflict greater damage on the natural world. It will probably lead to greater social disruption and psychological suffering, and it may lead to increased physical suffering even in advanced countries. We therefore advocate a revolution against the industrial system." This revolution may or may not make use of violence. It may be sudden or it may be a relatively gradual process spanning a few decades. We can't predict any of that. But we do outline in a very general way the measures that those who hate the industrial system should take in order to prepare the way for a revolution against that form of society. This is not to be a political revolution. Its object will be to overthrow not governments but the economic and technological basis of the present society. If we change the word industrial with healthcare, we get a disturbing sentence. We therefore advocate a revolution against the healthcare system. Luigi wrote his review in the beginning of 2024, less than a year before the shooting incident. In his review, Luigi wrote, quote, "It's easy to quickly and thoughtless write this off as the manifesto of a lunatic in order to avoid facing some of the uncomfortable problems it identifies. But it's simply impossible to ignore how prescient many of his predictions about modern society turned out. He was a violent individual, rightfully imprisoned, who maimed innocent people. While these actions tend to be characterized as those of a crazy Luddite, however, they are more accurately seen as those of an extreme political revolutionary." It's clear that these are words of admiration. Although Luigi acknowledges that Ted targeted innocent people, he somewhat justifies it by hinting these are necessary for political change. This view of the ends justifies the means is adopted frequently by young ideological people. He continues by citing a take he found online, quote, "Had the balls to recognize that peaceful protest has gotten us absolutely nowhere, and at the end of the day, he's probably right." When all other forms of communication fail, violence is necessary to survive. You may not like his methods, but to see things from his perspective, it's not terrorism, it's war and revolution. Fossil fuel companies actively suppress anything that stands in their way, and within a generation or two, it will begin costing human lives by greater and greater magnitudes, until the Earth is just a flaming ball orbiting third from the sun. Peaceful protest is outright ignored. Economic protest isn't possible in the current system. So how long until we recognize that violence against those who lead us to such destruction is justified as self-defense? "Violence never solved anything" is a statement uttered by cowards and predators, end quote. Reading this after the incident is deeply disturbing. This text is so illuminating that you might get the feeling that Luigi already made up his mind in January 2024. Did Luigi possibly dream about the recognition that the Unabomber achieved? Or was he deeply inspired by the call to action? Or was this review a hint to the world, or possibly to himself? It is important to remember that the road between words and action is a long one. A lot of people have different thoughts and ideas that do not translate into actions. But is it possible that Luigi was just mentally unstable? After all, some people will claim that only mentally unstable people take such actions. Here, we get into the realm of speculations. But we do know that Luigi claimed that his medical condition brought him to a state of depression. Is it possible that Luigi was taking SSRIs? The relation between SSRIs and violence behavior is frequently debated, as results are still ambiguous. A Swedish study conducted on the topic concluded, quote, "Our results suggest that clinicians be aware of the risk of high violent crime related to SSRI medication, and that they inform high-risk individuals about possible precursors to violence, such as hostility, aggressiveness, and irritability, so that patients may seek medical advice if they experience this during or after SSRI treatment." End quote. Obviously, correlation does not necessarily imply causation, since it is safe to assume that most people who commit heinous acts are mentally unwell and might seek a remedy. No one knows what was going on in Luigi Mangione's head. These factors may have taken part in shaping his mind towards committing such a crime. With that said, this action should be unanimously condemned. Brian Thompson was a father of two, and may he rest in peace.